One of the important things that our saddles do is give people feedback about how they're riding or how their horse is traveling. For instance, when people say, "Oh, my saddle slides forward," my answer, which they usually hate, is saddles rarely slide uphill. So that tells you that your horse is traveling in a downhill manner, and even possibly that you're driving with your seat or bracing in your stirrups, which will cause that to happen. So by having that kind of awareness, you then learn how to change that. And that's what we teach in the program, you know, by doing more transitions, keeping your weight back, thinking about all those sorts of things as you ride your horse. And, you know, on one hand, you can say that's about riding with excellence. The other is it's riding with care. You know, you want it to be the best possible experience for your horse. Keep him healthy. When a saddle slips side to side, that can tell you that your girth is too loose, but also it can tell you that you're losing your balance and weighting on one side of your stirrup heavier than the other, and that pulls your saddle over. So in the way that we teach people to ride, we make them not dependent on their stirrups, that they ride through their core, and the stirrups then are just kind of for lateral balance, but not by leaning. It's like your legs wrap around the horse, but the stirrups are just there for you to place your feet on, not to keep your balance by. When you see ruffled hairs, like when you unsaddle your horse, and you often most see them on the shoulders or towards the back of the saddle, this tells you about friction. And friction only happens when the two beings are doing something opposite. So if you're doing something that is the opposite of what your horse is doing, you're likely to get that to happen. And in terms of our fluidity program, I get people to think about what part of the horse's body is showing the ruffles and how does that correspond to your body. So if it's in the shoulders or it's on just one shoulder, then think about your own shoulders. You might find that you're actually stiff there, and that's what's causing a stiffness and therefore friction in that spot. Same thing with the hindquarters. You might find that you're very stiff through your hips or even your legs, and then that's holding the saddle still and your horse is moving underneath it. So by learning to use a fluid motion when you ride, kind of inside your skin, then all those kind of frictions go away. But it's such important feedback. I never once take off my saddle without looking at my horse's back and going, how could I have ridden him better today? Dry spots are a different issue. Dry spots are usually from excessive pressure, and again, people tend to usually see them up against the shoulders, and this usually tells you don't have enough shims. You haven't got enough clearance for your horse's shoulders there, and so there's too much pressure, and the pressure of the saddle and the rider is going to the front end. You don't want that. If you shim your horse correctly, you should not have any dry spots. I think every horse would love to be ridden in a super wide saddle because it just feels like a great big space for them to move in. But some horses are, you know, quite narrow. Certain breeds are very narrow, and you know, they're narrow chested, and if you look in the cleft of their chest, they kind of come up in a V like this. Other horses are more sprung through their ribs. They're wider, broader kinds of horses or breeds, and they have like a straight place between their front legs, and this is often a good indicator, but sometimes you'll find a horse that could, you know, go either way. And I tell people, you know, if you think, maybe my horse needs a super wide, but maybe it's a standard, then I'd say go with the super wide, because if you're tossing up like that, that's going to be the better one. Now, both saddles are going to be comfortable for horses. Even our standard is 7 times wider than the average saddle tree, because that goes with our philosophy. And some people, when they ride in the super wide, they feel a bit too widespread in their legs. And sometimes people don't like this, especially if they've never ridden bareback. It's a strange feeling. But in fact, if you've ridden bareback and you ride a wide horse, you'll find that that just feels natural to you. People are often worried about, you know, what if I get it wrong? Well, first of all, you can't do worse than a saddle that is too tight and too concave on the horse's back, like keeps the horse trapped down. Immediately that you go into our saddles, your horses are going to feel better. Now, the thing is to experiment with your shims. And you've seen a lot on this DVD already, you know, how you can check, is there enough space in the shoulders, is there enough space behind? Have I filled in the areas that my horse is lacking in? And then you just read your sweat patterns and see where you need to go from there. But it's hard to make things go really wrong. All you can do is just get it righter and righter. A lot of riders, either intentionally or unintentionally, drive with their seat, especially if your horse doesn't really want to go. You find yourself constantly like urging, and that will push a saddle further and further up onto a horse's shoulders. What we teach people, first of all, is the psychology of getting horses to go, but to have kind of a quiet seat, and you encourage a horse with your legs to come up and move out ahead of you, not drive with your seat. Imagine if you were on all fours and someone was sitting on your back and they started driving with their seat, your back would naturally hollow out. It's a terrible feeling. So if you sit back on your balance point and keep visualizing your horse coming out in front of you and then help him to do that whenever he lags behind, you won't have any problems. I think of it this way. I hold my saddle back and I ask my horse to go out in front of me. I think your horse is going to be so happy that you're going with a saddle that is comfortable for him, and that you're going to take the time to learn about how to adjust your saddle and your shims and your pad to give him the best experience possible when you ride him. And it's going to take you a little bit of time just to get used to that, because you know so many of us are used to just like throwing a saddle on and never thinking about it. And I didn't even know how to read a horse's back until one day I was like, wow, I just thought that was his build to be hollow behind his shoulders like that, or that was his build to be more hollow backed, or not to have a nice neck or a nice top line. And it's not. This is the only way that a horse can communicate to us what feels good to him and what doesn't. And you never want it to be as extreme as a horse not wanting to go forward anymore, or a horse bucking because he feels so unhappy in what you've got on him. This needs to be something that brings horses and humans together fluidly and in harmony and makes riding the best experience for both.